G'day, and now in this podcast we're going to look at a really important question in economics, which is why will a firm supply more of a good or service as the price rises? In fact, the question is probably even better to say, why will a firm only supply more as the price rises? And what we need to do is we need to go back to what we were looking at before in the last podcast, the idea of marginal cost. Now you remember that we looked at the different types of cost of production, and we looked at as how a firm, as it increases output, initially the gains in output rise, resulting in decreasing costs, decreasing marginal costs. But then as the firm adds more variable resources to fixed resources, output starts to decline, or turning it around, the law of increasing cost, the extra cost of production rises as we increase output. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at how a firm decides what to produce. Okay, so let's go over to here. So we're going to look at this right hand side of the curve, and I want you to imagine that here's a level of output. Let's make this 12 output, and we're going to say the cost of producing that 12th good is $7. So the firm will obviously produce this good if the price matches the cost of production. And remember, we're talking about economic costs, so that includes the profits of the firm better than what they could get by producing any other good or service, so the opportunity cost. So as long as the price matches the cost, the marginal cost of production of that 12th unit, the firm will produce that 12th unit. If the price were to fall below 7 units, the firm would not produce that 12th unit. So now let's have a look here, and let's say that the cost of producing the 13th good is $10. Now at the current market price of $7, and we'll just put there, so we said if P1, if price is currently $7, the firm will not produce the 13th good because it would cost $10 to make and they'd only get $7 back. So that simply would not cover all their costs of production, including the opportunity cost. So they wouldn't produce the 13th good. If, however, price rises from $7 to $10, the price now covers the extra cost of producing that extra good or service. And so the firm would indeed produce that extra good or service. Now, one of the things that we're going to look at subsequently is we don't actually use all this curve for the supply curve, because if you think about it, what it's telling us is this marginal cost curve tells us the relationship between output and the price, because as the price rises, so is the firm willing to supply more. So it tells us how much the firm is willing to supply based on the price, and that's really useful information. And that means that we can use the supply curve, the marginal cost curve, as a supply curve. So we call it the marginal cost curve, but we also call it supply. So the marginal cost curve equals the supply curve. Now, as we're going to look at a bit later on, we're not actually going to use much of this graph. Now we're going to define that precisely which part of the graph we do use, but for now, I just want you to understand that we use the right-hand part of the graph for our supply curve. That's why our supply curve is always upward sloping. So whenever we draw a supply curve, it's always upward sloping because it reflects the extra increasing marginal cost of production. And in theory, we should actually show it as a curve. We often show them just as a straight line, but it is in actual fact a curve which gets steeper as output increases.